Top 20 Asset Manager Interview Questions and Answers. Asset managers are charged with taking care of the money of the rich. They change these monies to bonds, equities, commodities and even real estate, all of which grow in value. Given that this field involves dealing with huge investments, getting an asset manager requires thorough screening. In case you are looking for a job as an asset manager, you need to know some of the commonly assessed areas. These 20 questions should give you a clear idea of what to expect in such an interview. 1. Why are you interested in this role? This question offers you a chance to sell yourself, even though it does not seem so. The right answer can convince the interviewer that you are up to the task. Tip number 1. Outline your motives. However, ensure that they are not material. Tip number 2. Be as brief as possible. Sample answer: I have developed really useful skills in asset management over the years. I believe that I am both passionate and hardworking and can steer this institution to even further heights. 2. What are the roles of an asset manager? This question seeks to determine whether you know what is required of you in the place of work. Tip number 1. Clearly outline the roles that are related to the place of work. Tip number 2. You can borrow from the job description. Sample answer: an asset manager manages investments on behalf of others. He or she determines the investments to make or avoid and ensure that these investments will keep on increasing in value. 3. What are the qualities that an asset manager needs to be effective? Different jobs need different sets of qualities. Certain qualities are specific to an asset manager, which one should strive to have. Tip number 1. Mention job-specific qualities. Tip number 2. You can relate the qualities to the nature of the job. Sample answer: a good asset manager should be knowledgeable. He or she should possess strong research and analytical skills. He or she should also have vast experience in investing and the right temperament. 4. What major challenges did you face during your last role, and how did you solve them? Everybody wants to be around a problem solver. By showing that you sailed through a given challenge, you will be increasing your chances of landing the job tremendously. Tip number 1. Talk about a challenge that was not entirely your fault. Tip number 2. Show how you solved the issue. Sample answer: when I joined my last workplace, most investors were leaving the company because they had lost faith. I was tasked with regaining their faith and preventing further pullout. I arranged meetings with them and kept in touch, encouraging them and convincing them. When other investors who had left heard what I had done, they came back to the company. 5. Describe your daily routine as an asset manager. You should conduct some research and ascertain what asset managers do daily. This will help you answer this question. Tip number 1. Only include activities that are relevant to the job. Tip number 2. Do not include information that may shed you in a bad light. Sample answer: whenever I get to the office, you can then go ahead and list everything that asset managers do on a daily. These include identifying investments, keeping track of them, calling investors, among many other things. 6. Describe briefly about your experience. Your job experience is captured in the CV. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason to keep repeating where you worked. Tip number 1. Mention the things that you have learned in your place of work. Tip number 2. You can include any other experience that has built your career. Sample answer: I took a human resource management course while working with Stanbic, which equipped me with the leadership and management skills that have helped me in this job. While still at Stanbic, I learned how to analyze the market before investing critically. 7. What kind of strategies and mindset is required for this job? This is a simple question that leaves many people stuttering. The interviewer would like to know if you have the right strategy and mindset for the job at hand. Tip number 1. Everything that you mention should be job-specific. Tip number 2. Talk of a strategy that will keep you on top of the game. Sample answer: this job requires somebody who is attentive to details. It requires somebody with a winning mindset who will find the best investment avenue and follow it. The person also needs to have a fallback strategy that will help him mitigate losses. 8. What is the biggest challenge that you foresee in this job? This question is mostly asked when the interviewer wants to ascertain whether you did proper research about its operations. Tip number 1. Spot one challenge. Do not have a list of challenges. Tip number 2, do not come off as incompetent. Sample answer: having gone through your company's requirement, I saw that the manager is expected to work half a day on Saturday. However, being an Adventist, I believe that this may be quite a challenge. However, I believe that we can work around this. 9. How do you stay motivated at work? What keeps you going? Management may be lucrative, but it is not as easy as everybody sees it. Therefore, make sure that you respond correctly to this question. Tip number 1, keep away from answers that will make you look materialistic. Tip number 2, you can choose to sell yourself. Sample answer: I am a hard worker who believes in results. I am always yearning to outdo myself. This gives me the urge and pushes me to continue even when things appear bleak. This is a classic example of selling yourself. 10. Describe a time when you failed in this role and the lesson you learned. It is not a bad thing to fail in something, especially if you are just starting. However, what follows after failure is all that matters. Did you learn a lesson? Tip number 1, own up. Tip number 2, show how the lesson has helped you in your work. Sample answer: while interning at Stanbic, I postponed clearing some reports and took them home to work on them. However, while at home, there was a power outage that lasted for a record 12 hours. I reported to the office the next day without completing even a single one, and my supervisor became furious. I learned never to carry forward any work, however small. 11. In your own opinion, how important is the relationship with clients? As an asset manager, your relationship with the clients is mandatory. It would be best if you always strive to give it the weight it deserves. Therefore, be careful when answering this question. Tip number 1, denote that relationship with clients is essential. Tip number 2, convince the interviewer that you will prioritize this. Sample answer: I believe that having a good relationship with clients is essential in this line of work. Unless you keep the relationship with a client warm and running, they cannot trust you with their money. I will, therefore, strive to maintain excellent relationships with clients. 12. What do you think about risk? Risk management is a very important part of business and investment. As an asset manager dealing with people's finances, you should have a good risk management strategy. Tip number 1, do not be a gambler or coward. Tip number 2, convince the interviewer that you have plans. Sample answer: I have a neutral attitude towards risk. I lock out emotions whenever I invest. What matters to me at the moment of risk-taking is what my clients prefer. For risk management, I always have plans and suggestions ready for every scenario. 13. How do reporting and forecasting help you in your work? The interviewer must ascertain whether you are a good reporter. Tip number 1, you have to give the two some importance. Tip number 2, explain to the interviewer how these have helped you in the course of your work. Sample answer: doing my reports quarterly helps me stay on top of the game, which has seen me retain several clients in the past. It also helps me pick the best moves while also keeping in touch with clients. 14. What has been your biggest professional disappointment? The interviewer may ask you such a question to know more about you and how you view life. Tip number 1, refer to something that was beyond your control. Tip number 2, show acceptance. Sample answer: I could have made a big difference to my career had I gone back for further education while I was still young. 15. Could you please describe your work style? Such questions give you a chance to impress the interviewer, which may go a long way to help you secure the job. Tip number 1, impress the interviewer with your skills. Tip number 2, your work style should be effective. Sample answer: having been an asset manager for some time now, I know how to go about the industry. Owing to the job at hand, I focus all my attention on my work when going about my duties. This helps me complete my work both quickly and effectively. 16. What are some of your strengths that you believe make you perfect for this position? It would help if you were self-conscious. This is often a simple question that you can easily tackle when prepared. Tip number 1, make the most out of it, but only mention strengths that are relevant to the job. Tip number 2, find out the strengths that the company prides itself in. Sample answer: I have observed over the years that I can work well under pressure. Working with different people has also given me the interpersonal skills that I need in management. 17. Can you describe how you show your confidence in a person's ability to do a given task during delegation? As a manager, you need to be confident in your subordinates. This gives an employee the surety and motivation to handle a given task effectively. Tip number 1, discuss how you assign responsibility to the best candidate. Tip number 2, include follow-up procedures. Sample answer: I normally communicate with employees in an assuring tone and make them understand all that is expected from them. I also give them the necessary resources so that they can effectively handle a given task. 18. Given that this is a managerial position, how will you keep your staff members motivated? Employee motivation plays an important role in business. Your staff needs to be at their best if you need delivery and performance. Tip number 1, emphasize team building. Tip number 2, be authentic. Sample answer: I always ensure that all staff members are recognized, especially those that meet their goals. I also ensure that task delegation is interdependent, which allows the employees to learn from one another. 19. How do you measure your success as a manager? We all have different ways of self-evaluation. The interviewer wants to know if you set targets for yourself. Tip number 1, your response should offer measurable targets. Tip number 2, make sure that you denote what you bring to the table. Sample answer: as a manager, I am charged with setting goals and ensuring that they have been met. Provided that I have built a strong team and keep employing relevant data, I always ensure that the company grows, which is my measure of success. 20. How would you deal with a subordinate who cannot get his or her job right? Management also entails leadership. As an asset manager, you need to offer proper leadership to the firm or institution. Tip number 1, show that you are a good leader. Tip number 2, keep in mind that leadership comes with responsibility. Sample answer: I believe that all the employees under me mirror who I am as a manager. In such a case, I will have a heart-to-heart with such an employee to see how we can solve the issue. However, if nothing changes over time, I will have no other option but to dismiss him or her. Conclusion: these top 20 asset management interview questions and answer summarizes some of the most asked areas in asset management interviews. I hope that they will help you ace your interview.